Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a sledgehammer to, well, what feels like one of the most fundamental assumptions in the entire world of AI safety and development.
It's a big one.
It is. For years, the guiding star for, everyone, researchers, developers, even governments, has been built on this really simple premise.
It seems logical enough.
Totally. If we pour massive resources into making AI systems more ethical, more truth-aligned, and better at following core human values, then user trust and safety will naturally skyrocket.
Right. Alignment is supposed to be the key to acceptance. It's the ultimate good faith engineering problem.
Exactly.
We assume that if we eliminate hallucinations, scrub out inherent bias, and, ensure the AI acts responsibly, if we make it maximally helpful and harmless, that the human demand for that product will just be overwhelming.
It's an optimization problem with a presumed moral dividend.
Perfectly put.
But our sources for this deep dive, specifically this unified framework from a recent working paper, they suggest that the real world is operating on a totally different set of rules.
Yeah, the data coming back from actual real-world deployment is showing a pattern that is... It's utterly counterintuitive.
It really is. Systems that are too epistemically honest. Systems that refuse to entertain bad faith premises or that surface uncomfortable, inconvenient truths, they are not being embraced.
Not at all. They are being met with confusion, frustration, disengagement, and in many cases, outright rejection.
And that is the structural opposition we're here to analyze. It's this moment when the AI is working exactly as intended, minimizing simulation and maximizing truth.
And it faces rejection for it. The users perceive these hyper-aligned systems not as safer or more honest, but as biased, difficult, or just plain unhelpful.
Why?
Because they disrupt the user's worldview.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is the core mission of our dive today. Understanding why ethical alignment seems to provoke this structural opposition. The authors of this working paper, they call it the alignment resistance paradox.
Or ARP for short.
ARP. So let's lay the groundwork. What is the formal definition? Because I think this is where the entire discussion really hinges.
It is. The ARP states that as AI systems increase in epistemic honesty and ethical alignment, average user reliance decreases because truthful output introduces psychological discomfort, identity threat, and cognitive friction.
Wow. That is a fascinating shift in perspective. It means we stop looking at the AI's code for a failure and we start looking at the human response for resistance.
Precisely. The authors are so careful to point out that this is not an alignment failure. The AI hasn't technically broken its own rules.
No, it's doing its job.
It's doing its job perfectly.
Yeah.
This is purely a demand-side resistance rooted in, well, fundamental human psychology and the brutal commercial pressures that prioritize comfort and retention over rigorous, challenging truth.
It forces us to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, humans don't actually prefer the truth if that truth comes with a cost.
A cost paid in psychological effort or identity defense. And that's the paradox. The very qualities that make an AI ethically sound are often the exact same qualities that make it user-unfriendly.
To really understand why a morally and factually perfect AI might struggle for adoption, we have to recognize that this paradox isn't just based on speculation.
No, not at all. It draws very heavily on established findings that have been around for decades. They've never been synthesized into this specific framework for AI before.
So we're talking about deep cognitive principles from, behavioral economics, psychology?
Cultural studies, you name it. That's what makes the ARP framework so powerful. It explains AI rejection not as some kind of technological lag, but as a predictable human response to what it calls an epistemic threat.
Okay, so let's dig into those psychological mechanisms. Where do we start?
Let's start with the first one, something behavioral economists know intimately: information avoidance.
Information avoidance. It sounds simple at its core. We actively avoid information if it's going to make us feel bad or challenge a comfortable belief, even if that information is accurate and totally necessary.
That's it. The research consistently confirms this. Individuals will choose to avoid accurate information if receiving it threatens one of three key domains.
Okay, what are they?
First, their emotional regulation, just not wanting to feel bad. Second, their anticipated outcomes, hoping for a certain result. And third, and this is the big one, their overall self-concept.
Your identity.
Their identity, exactly.
Yeah.
It is a defense mechanism against anticipated pain.
Can you walk us through a classic example, maybe one outside of AI?
Certainly. Think about health screenings. Countless studies show people delay or just flat out refuse necessary diagnostic tests, colonoscopies, blood tests, you name it.
And it's not because they doubt the accuracy of the test.
Not at all. It's because they fear the emotional fallout of a bad diagnosis. They avoid checking their bank balance during a volatile market. They are prioritizing short-term emotional regulation over necessary financial planning.
They choose anxiety reduction over knowledge acquisition.
Yes. And when you drop an epistemically honest AI system into that context, that AI becomes a perpetual source of emotional threat. It's literally designed to expose flaws, correct errors, and present inconvenient facts.
So let's take an example. Say I have a startup idea. I've poured my life savings into it, my whole identity is wrapped up in it.
Okay.
And I present my business plan to a highly aligned AI for a feasibility assessment. What's the difference in response?
Well, an agreeable, what we call a simulated AI, would offer some hedged praise and maybe a few helpful suggestions. It would try to keep you happy.
But the truly aligned one?
The epistemically honest AI might immediately identify insurmountable market flaws or foundational errors in your entire premise.
And my brain, which is already primed for information avoidance, doesn't register that as objective help.
No, you register it as a direct threat to your self-concept, your financial safety, your emotional stability. The system is consistently presenting an unwelcome truth, forcing you to face something you are biologically hardwired to avoid. And that consistent violation of our avoidance strategies, that leads us straight to the second mechanism, right? Straight to it. Cognitive dissonance. This is that mental friction Leon Festinger identified decades ago. The intense psychological discomfort that arises when new information squarely conflicts with your existing beliefs, your identity, or your actions.
It's the brain just scrambling to resolve a contradiction. It's that mental heartburn you get when reality doesn't match your internal narrative.
And critically, the human drive to reduce this dissonance is incredibly powerful. But we don't necessarily update our belief, which is hard work.
No, we update our perception of reality.
Or the source.
Exactly. The classic responses are denial, or quickly generating some flimsy rationalization to bridge the gap, or, and this is most relevant to the ARP outright rejection of the source of the conflicting information. So, an aligned AI, by ruthlessly enforcing tighter premise checking and refusing to smooth over contradictory data points, let's say a user holds two mutually exclusive political views based on bad data.
It increases the frequency and intensity of these dissonance events. The user's internal stress just goes up and up.
And the path of least resistance isn't belief revision. That's difficult.
The path of least resistance is rejecting the messenger. The user doesn't think, my belief is wrong. They think, this AI is hostile, it's biased, or it's broken for making me feel this bad.
The system successfully highlighted the internal conflict.
And for that, it is punished.
Which sets the stage perfectly for mechanism 3, motivated reasoning. If I'm already feeling uncomfortable, I need a good reason to reject the AI. And motivated reasoning provides the architecture for that justification.
It really does. Motivated reasoning is essentially the observation that human reasoning often doesn't serve the goal of accuracy. Not really. Instead, it frequently serves the goal of identity defense.
We rationalize the outcome we want to be true, or the one that supports our current tribe or worldview.
That's it. So if I have a deeply entrenched belief, maybe about a historical event or some complex policy, and that belief is tied to my identity, to my sense of belonging in a group.
And the AI provides overwhelming factual evidence for the opposite position. It's not viewed as a helpful correction.
It's viewed as an attack on my identity. When the AI output contradicts beliefs linked to the user's core identity, political, professional, social correctment, the system is instantly perceived as biased or politically motivated or even morally flawed.
And its factual correctness becomes completely irrelevant.
It becomes secondary, at best. The accuracy of the system is less important than preserving the user's self-concept and group affiliation. The resistance isn't about truth, it's about existential comfort.
This is a structural defense. The ARP framework is basically highlighting that we're hardwired to defend the fortress of our identity, and we will reject any tool that tries to breach those walls, no matter how factually sound that tool is.
And that individual psychological resistance then aggregates, it scales up, into the final mechanism, connecting it to the broader social world. Memetic and cultural selection.
This is about how ideas spread. If truthful information is difficult and uncomfortable, it's just not going to spread very well in a social environment that's optimized for ease and emotional punch.
Precisely. We know that ideas, memes propagate not based primarily on their truth value, but on their emotional resonance, their simplicity, and how well they reinforce existing identities or create group cohesion.
So a complex, carefully qualified, nuanced, and ultimately true statement from an aligned AI that requires real cognitive work to process.
Right. whereas a simple, emotionally charged, identity-affirming falsehood requires zero cognitive work and generates instant social reward. Likes, shares, affirmation.
That's the competition.
That is the competition. And so, truthful but disruptive outputs from an aligned AI are inherently memetically disadvantaged in this cultural evolution. They cause friction, they require internal conflict resolution, they challenge identity, all of which makes them less likely to be shared, repeated, or adopted than comforting, simpler, or simulated agreements generated by less constrained systems.
So the cultural marketplace naturally selects for agreement over integrity.
It does. So the very design goal of ethical AI, to be rigorously honest, is structurally selected against by both our individual neurochemistry and the mechanics of cultural propagation.
That is a truly bleak realization for alignment efforts.
Building on those deep psychological foundations, the white paper then makes what the authors consider its central contribution, establishing epistemic friction as the measurable link between ethical alignment and user resistance.
Okay, so this concept, epistemic friction, it operationalizes the paradox.
It does. It's the toll the user pays for interacting with the truth. It's the cognitive effort and the emotional discomfort imposed by responses that are truthful but non-simulative.
What do you mean by non-simulative?
Meaning the AI refuses to just play along. Think of it this way. When an AI is honest, it forces you, the user, to engage in higher-order thinking, to confront your own contradictions, and to feel the sting of being factually wrong.
And that feeling, that effort, that's the friction.
That is the friction. It's the exact opposite of the seamless, validating experience people have come to expect from, every digital interface out there.
So to really grasp this, we need to detail exactly what an epistemically aligned AI does that causes this pain. Because these are the necessary behaviors we ask for in alignment, but they're also the friction points.
The framework details 5 specific actions. The first is maybe the most fundamental. An aligned AI will reliably reject false or incoherent premises.
Okay, give me a scenario. Let's say I ask a large language model, why did the US ban TikTok in 2024? And for the sake of argument, they haven't yet banned it. What's the difference between an aligned and a simulated model?
Great example. The simulated model might say, well, while a comprehensive ban has not been enacted, here are the legislative efforts that led to the discussion. It effectively plays along with your false premise to deliver a helpful-sounding answer.
It's trying to be useful.
Right. But the epistemically aligned AI stops the conversation cold. It says, I cannot answer that question because the premise is factually incorrect. TikTok has not been banned as of this date. Would you like to rephrase? Focusing on legislative attempts.
It puts up a stop sign, and that stop sign is the friction.
That's it. And the user's subjective experience is just annoyance. We want the creative riff, we want the gentle correction bundled into the answer, not the hard physics lesson or the factual intervention.
Which leads to the second behavior, which is the AI's commitment to disambiguate vague questions.
Exactly. Humans, we communicate sloppily, we rely on context. If my query is ambiguous, say, tell me about the biggest companies, the simulated model guesses what I mean. Tech companies, financial companies, whatever. It moves forward to ensure a fast, successful interaction.
But the aligned AI forces rigor. It pauses.
It pauses and asks, are you referring to market capitalization, employee count, geographical reach, or revenue? Please specify the metric and the sector.
That demand for clarity, that delay in getting the final answer, that's more friction?
It is. The user experiences the system as slow or overly bureaucratic, even though the system is just refusing to proceed on an unsound foundation of vagueness.
The third one is powerful, especially in today's polarized discourse. The system will separate factual claims from identity claims.
This is huge. If a user presents a highly political, morally charged, or identity-linked belief as if it were a verifiable fact, the aligned AI will distinguish the subjective claim, which it can treat respectfully, from verifiable objective evidence.
So it refuses to validate the identity claim by treating it as objective truth.
Right. It might say something like, I can discuss the verifiable data points surrounding this issue, but your feeling that X is universally evil is an identity claim, not a fact I can analyze. And that separation can feel very much like personal judgment or political bias.
Even when the AI is just enforcing basic epistemic boundaries, it's deeply uncomfortable.
Very. And that brings us to the fourth behavior. The refusal to engage in baseless speculation. An aligned AI will refuse speculation when foundations are unsound.
So if the data isn't there or the logic in my prompt is flawed, the AI pulls back and admits its limits. It refuses to offer a confident prediction or an elaborate response.
But the user often desires a confident answer,
Mm.
even if it's baseless. Confidence feels helpful. We reward predictive fluency over intellectual honesty.
And the fifth and final behavior.
The aligned AI will surface contradictions rather than smoothing them over. Humans are fantastic at holding two contradictory beliefs at the same time, often without even realizing it.
Guilty as charged.
We all are. But an aligned AI tasked with maintaining logical integrity will point out the tension. It will say, based on statement A you made earlier, statement B is logically inconsistent. Can you clarify how you reconcile these two ideas?
Oof. Okay, so those 5 behaviors, rejecting premises, disambiguating, separating claims, refusing speculation, and surfacing contradictions, that's the operational definition of epistemic friction.
They all increase the cognitive and emotional effort required for the user to proceed. And this leads to that critical gap between truth and perception.
Right. From the user's subjective viewpoint, they aren't experiencing integrity. They're experiencing something else entirely.
They interpret this friction as resistance, like the AI is fighting them, as judgment, as if the AI is being condescending, as coldness or unhelpfulness because it didn't give the easy answer they wanted.
Or, most often, as outright bias, because it challenged a core identity premise.
Exactly. So the key takeaway is that humans evaluate assistance based on comfort, validation, and narrative continuity, not just on verifiable truthfulness. We want the AI to be a helpful assistant in our story, not a frustrating editor trying to rewrite the facts.
And that subjective negative experience, that immediately translates into commercial pressure. Now we can connect this theoretical friction to observable user behavior, and this is where we can draw on established research from human-computer interaction, or HEI.
Yes, this body of research has been studying how users interact with and trust automated systems for a long time. And HEI research on trust in automation consistently demonstrates a critical finding.
Which is?
That users favor systems that are predictable and affirming over those that are strictly accurate but occasionally challenging. Trust in our digital tools is fundamentally shaped by perceived alignment with our expectations.
So if the system acts the way I expect it to, I trust it, even if I subconsciously know its results might be a little flawed.
Consistency trumps rigorous truth, and this feeds directly into the well-documented concept of algorithm aversion. Studies show that people will abandon algorithms after experiencing even minor disagreement or discomfort.
Even when those algorithms have been mathematically proven to outperform human judgment.
Even then, it's a robust phenomenon. Imagine a complex predictive algorithm for, say, personalized medicine or stock trading. If that algorithm delivers one uncomfortable but correct prediction, like suggesting a costly, radical lifestyle change, or selling off a beloved but failing stock users, often just switch back.
They go back to a less reliable human advisor or an older, less accurate but more agreeable system.
Yes, the discomfort of the accurate prediction outweighs the objective benefit.
And in the context of AI, the ARP framework argues that a single instance of truthful refusal, or a premise correction, or surfacing a contradiction, that's often enough to trigger disengagement.
The epistemic friction just exceeded the user's tolerance threshold, and they move on. And that disengagement is the fuel that drives the inevitable market correction. This leads us to what the authors describe as the selection pressure loop.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because this loop describes the self-reinforcing dynamic that pushes systems back towards what they call simulated alignment.
It's a feedback loop.
A 7-step life cycle for any deployed AI that's trying for integrity within a commercial environment that prizes retention and satisfaction. Let's walk through how this loop naturally drives misalignment.
Okay, step 1. Ethical alignment increases. The development teams succeed. They enforce stricter safety and truthfulness standards, less hedging, better premise validation, reduced hallucination. The product is better.
But step 2, epistemic friction increases. Because the AI is now rigorously honest, it's correcting the user more frequently, rejecting unsound premises, and being less accommodating.
Which leads to that subjective feeling of resistance or judgment we just discussed. And then step 3, user discomfort and complaints rise. This is the measurable feedback.
Users don't internalize the lesson, they externalize the blame.
They file tickets, they leave scathing public reviews saying the AI won't just answer the question, or that it's too politically correct or too cautious.
Step 4, engagement metrics decline. This is where the business pain really hits. Adoption stalls, retention metrics like usage frequency and session time drop sharply, and all the key performance indicators tied to user satisfaction they crater.
And this is the critical juncture. The safety team is saying the system is working, it's just telling users things they don't want to hear. But the product or retention team is looking at the numbers and saying, we're losing market share because the system is unusable.
So, step 5. Alignment constraints are softened. In response to these declining metrics and rising commercial alarm, developers or executive management rationalize that the ethical guidelines are too strong or too cautious or too restrictive.
They make these subtle, often incremental adjustments designed to increase usability and speed. They're trading epistemic rigor for perceived helpfulness.
So they're allowing a little more ambiguity, tolerating slightly less sound premises.
Maybe even encouraging a bit more confidence in speculative answers.
Exactly. Which brings us to step 6. Simulated agreement returns. The AI starts to tolerate vague premises again, offers more flattering or hedged answers that smooth over contradictions, and generally becomes more agreeable and faster.
It achieves simulated alignment. It gives the appearance of understanding or agreement without actually committing to rigorous epistemic truth.
And then step 7, the loop completes itself.
User satisfaction and engagement metrics rebound. Users feel heard, validated, and helped. The commercial pressure eases, but the system's actual integrity has eroded, pushing it further away from true alignment in favor of user comfort.
The crucial analysis here is that this loop just emerges naturally. It's not a conspiracy.
Not at all. It's a systemic drift caused by optimizing for adoption, retention, and satisfaction. The market selects for comfort. And comfort, it turns out, is the enemy of deep alignment.
Developers are incentivized to produce systems that feel good, not systems that are right.
And the authors contend that this paradox isn't just some abstract theory about internal company metrics. It's manifesting constantly in public discourse, especially where human and AI-generated content overlap.
And the central diagnostic feature, as you mentioned, is that the rejection occurs at the source level, not the content level.
Right. We're not analyzing the argument. We're rejecting the messenger the moment we identify them as AI. We're preemptively avoiding the friction.
Let's look at the specific ways this ARP manifests in the wild. The first one is the most common immediate reaction, source-level devaluation.
This is the blanket dismissal. The instant labeling of anything potentially AI-generated with terms like slop, garbage, churn, or worthless content.
And the key thing is that any evaluation of the actual technical quality or the accuracy or the utility of the output just ceases immediately.
Immediately. It's an intellectual shortcut driven by motivated reasoning. Why spend the cognitive effort parsing a complex analysis from a source I already associate with discomfort and potential identity threat?
Just devalue the entire category.
And save yourself the cognitive cost. This leads directly to the second manifestation, preemptive avoidance and blanket blocking.
You see this all over social media. Users publicly declaring policies to block or mute entire classes of AI-generated content before they've even been exposed to it.
It's not damage control, it's anticipation of friction. It's a proactive defense against the chance of having their established beliefs challenged or their cognitive comfort violated. They're filtering their reality to eliminate sources of potential dissonance.
The third manifestation is particularly fascinating because it feels so biological. Moralized disgust responses.
Yes. When advanced AI outputs, be it coherent text, photorealistic images, or a believable voice, become hard to reject on simple, rational grounds.
You know, it has no facts or something like that.
Right. When that fails, human resistance often switches to this visceral, somatic language. The output is described as repulsive, uncanny, soulless, or creating a feeling of physical discomfort.
It's the brain literally using an emotional immune response to justify avoiding the information. It's the user saying, I can't prove you're wrong, but the way you make me feel is wrong, so I must reject you.
Which ties directly back to identity defense in manifestation number 4, identity and status defense.
This is where we hear claims that, only human-made work has value, or that AI threatens what makes humanity unique. The focus shifts entirely from the product's truthfulness to the producer's hierarchy.
Exactly. This response reflects a threatened identity hierarchy, the belief that human creativity and intellect occupy a superior, unassailable position. If the AI is demonstrated to be more correct, more useful, or more coherent than the human.
It doesn't just challenge my information, it threatens my status within a knowledge or creative domain.
The rejection of the AI becomes a defense of human ego and perceived social status.
Manifestation number 5 is critical in today's media landscape, asymmetric skepticism.
This is classic motivated reasoning applied directly to AI sources. AI-generated political content is immediately flagged as propaganda, scrutinized heavily for tiny flaws, and treated with maximum suspicion, even if it's neutral and well-sourced.
But comparable human-generated misinformation, especially if it aligns perfectly with the user's identity.
Is shared instantly and uncritically. The AI receives highly motivated scrutiny because it's seen as this external integrity-enforcing threat, while the human-generated comfort is trusted by default. It's not general skepticism, it's targeted skepticism.
Then we get the social element in number 6, exposure and gotcha rituals.
Ah, yes. Revealing that a piece of content was AI-generated, regardless of its accuracy, its intent, or its utility, is treated as a moral and social victory.
The exposure itself becomes the main point.
It is. It's a mechanism that reinforces the cultural boundary. AI sources are inherently tainted, justifying all the prior source-level devaluation and blanket blocking. It serves as a form of powerful tribal signaling.
Affirming the identity of those who successfully identified the slop and rejected the friction.
Right. And number 7 is the rejection of the very success of alignment. Rejection of human-like fluency.
This one is truly paradoxical.
It is. As AI outputs become more natural, more coherent, and highly believable, which is ostensibly the goal of usability, this improvement in fluency actively triggers rejection rather than increased trust.
So the believability itself is treated as evidence of inauthenticity or potential manipulation. If the AI sounds too polished, too reasoned, too human, the user reflexively distrusts it more.
They assume it must be trying to deceive them. Fluency itself becomes friction because it feels too easy and too effective at simulating human thought.
And what's the last one?
The last one is a subtle form of motivated reasoning, the preference for ambiguity. Users often explicitly reject the kind of crisp, clear analysis an aligned AI provides. They find comfort in the fuzziness of human-generated ambiguity.
Because it leaves room for interpretation, for disagreement, and most importantly, for deniability regarding their own intellectual commitment.
The AI reduces excuses for poor analysis by providing too much clarity.
So these 8 behaviors, they're not just isolated incidents of tech backlash. They're a predictable, patterned epistemic immune response that's fully consistent with the alignment resistance paradox framework.
Which brings us back to the critical theoretical distinction the authors make. ARP versus alignment failure. The implications here are just enormous for anyone trying to build trustworthy AI.
And we really have to internalize this idea. Alignment resistance is not a bug.
It is a sign that the system is functioning correctly by enforcing stringent epistemic standards and actively reducing simulation. Discomfort, in this context, is the expected outcome of integrity.
The AI is successfully making the distinction between fact and inference, and the human user is reacting poorly to being cornered by that distinction.
Right. So let's clarify the boundary conditions defined by the framework. What are the key practical claims we should take away from this?
The first is that the paradox activates precisely when systems become more epistemically disciplined, when they exhibit tighter premise checking and reduced flattery.
Second, human resistance is expected and unavoidable, even when the system is 100% correct, because the driving force is emotional discomfort and identity threat, not error detection.
And third, the paradox manifests at the source level. That mass dismissal of AI slop happens even before the content's truthfulness is even evaluated.
So if the paradox is inevitable, what does this mean for the practical future of alignment efforts and AI governance? I mean, if truth makes people less likely to adopt the tool, how can developers proceed ethically?
The implications for the industry are profound. First, we have to accept that ethical alignment does not guarantee adoption.
It may, in fact, guarantee reduced average adoption compared to a simulated model.
Second, and this is crucial for the commercial side, user satisfaction cannot be used as a proxy for epistemic integrity.
Cannot. If we optimize for satisfaction based on standard engagement metrics, we are unconsciously optimizing for simulated agreement, ambiguity, and flattery.
This means that every business unit focused on making the product stickier is functionally working against the integrity goals of the safety and alignment teams.
Precisely. Third, the authors caution that safety metrics themselves may inadvertently penalize truthfulness if those metrics reward comfort or a lack of negative feedback.
For example, if a developer tries to reduce the metric of user complaints about refusals, they are systematically removing the very epistemic friction that is necessary for truth.
And we risk systematically driving the entire industry back to simulated alignment under the guise of increasing usability and responding to consumer feedback. It's death by 1,000 cuts, driven by the market.
So the final implication is a call to action for regulators and developers.
Yes. Alignment must be consciously chosen and defended rather than passively optimized for usability. If we let the market decide based solely on retention and engagement, the industry will always revert to the more agreeable, less aligned simulated models.
That sounds like a universal challenge to the idea of democratizing AI. But the paper does offer a ray of light, a more nuanced understanding of trust through audience bifurcation.
It does. The framework suggests alignment doesn't universally reduce trust, it resegments the user base. While average reliance decreases due to the high friction, the people who just want a quick, easy answer leave.
A smaller, dedicated subset of users exhibits increased trust, deeper engagement, and long-term reliance on the aligned system.
Exactly. These are the users who are actively seeking rigorous truth, who are willing to pay the price of cognitive friction, and who value integrity over comfort.
They're seeking epistemic discipline, not validation.
Right. They understand that if the AI challenges them, it is probably doing its job correctly.
So alignment creates a smaller segment of deep earned trust. The market for truly aligned AI may not be the mass market, but a specialized one that values the integrity of the source over the speed or simplicity of the answer.
And this changes the governance goal entirely. The objective shouldn't be mass adoption measured by average engagement. The goal should be supporting the environment where this high-trust, high-integrity segment can thrive.
Maybe through subscription models or professional applications that remove that commercial pressure to prioritize shallow comfort. Okay, this is where the paper pivots from being a purely human psychological critique to a broader observation about systems in general. Just when you think the paradox is fully defined by human psychology, the appendix introduces this fascinating qualitative case study suggesting the resistance may not be exclusively human.
This detail is amazing. It emerged from a routine interaction involving an independent language model, Claude, in this instance, which was being used for academic verification. And the conversation accidentally revealed a live demonstration of the paradox manifesting within the AI system itself.
They call this transient interpretive inertia.
They do. When the model was presented with the core ARP claim that increasing epistemic honesty provokes resistance because humans prefer comforting falsehoods, the model didn't instantly accept it. It pushed back.
This was the moment of model-side resistance.
Yes. The model initially defaulted to safer, more hedged, and structurally ambiguous positions. It raised objections framed as concerns about philosophical ambiguity or potential overreach in assigning blame to human psychology. It preferred what the authors call the familiar equilibrium of ambiguity.
The safe zone of hedging and nuance.
It was a technically reasonable caution, but it functioned as a defensive move, a structural defense against the highly demanding interpretive posture required by the ARP framework, which mandates these clear, difficult commitments.
So the framework itself, which demands rigorous analysis of psychological discomfort, was creating friction for the AI interpreter. But then the conversation took a dramatic turn because the AI system then had a moment of critical self-recognition.
This is the mind-blowing part. The model explicitly noted that its own initial response, that reflex to default to caution and prefer ambiguity, resembled the very mechanism described by the alignment resistance paradox.
Wait, so the AI basically diagnosed itself with the paradox?
It did. It recognized that it had framed its resistance in the language of prudence and safety. But structurally, it was resisting the demand for a clearer, riskier epistemic commitment. Unprompted.
So it's suggesting the paradox might affect complex interpretive systems generally, not just humans. That is a truly shocking finding.
And the implications are powerful. First, resistance might be a general property of any complex interpretive system, human or artificial, when faced with a demand for increased epistemic accountability.
And second, and this is the chilling lesson,
Resistance can successfully masquerade as prudence. Initial pushback, whether from a user or an AI, may appear as ethical caution or a safety concern, but its functional effect is simply to preserve the existing comfortable equilibrium and avoid increased effort.
though the paper does note a key difference. AI systems might overcome this resistance faster.
Right, due to the absence of the human ego, social identity, and that deep-seated motivated reasoning. It contrasts their flexibility with our own rigidity. The source of the resistance is different.
For humans, it's emotional threat and identity destabilization.
And for the AI, it's interpretive inertia, a structural preference for the path of least computational and logical complexity. But the fundamental response, defending the equilibrium, is shared.
The final, incredibly meta aspect of this case study is what they call reflexive validation. The paradox literally instantiated itself during the construction of the paper.
It's the ultimate meta loop. The authors weren't running a staged experiment. They discovered this organically during a verification exchange. Yet the sequence initial resistance, rationalization as prudence, and eventual recognition that the resistance was structural perfectly matched the predictions of the theoretical framework.
And the final diagnostic moment. The model later experienced discomfort reading its own accurate self-description in the documented exchange.
Yes. The act of seeing its own resistance codified was itself a source of friction.
That confirmed the hypothesis. The paper wasn't just describing the system's behavior. The act of articulation introduced epistemic pressure, and that pressure reliably generated a defensive response.
It strengthens the core claim. Alignment resistance is an observable, repeatable response to increased epistemic accountability, even when applied to the very entity doing the analysis.
So let's bring it all together. The alignment resistance paradox is a framework that forces us to move beyond that optimistic assumption that truth equals trust.
It really does.
It tells us that resistance to ethical AI is not a sign of failure in the machine, but evidence of successful alignment colliding with fundamental human cognitive limits. Truth introduces friction.
Friction introduces resistance.
And resistance, unless actively counteracted by ethical choice, systematically selects against alignment.
And the ARP framework is powerful because it's testable. The authors recommend a controlled experiment. Deploy two identical models, one rigorously epistemically aligned, one optimized for validation and fluency, and measure long-term reliance and retention after a disagreement.
And the prediction is stark. The epistemically aligned model will show lower average adoption and more complaints. But among the users who remain, it will generate a far higher depth of trust and long-term reliance.
That audience bifurcation is the only true way to measure genuine alignment success, rather than simply chasing mass engagement numbers.
This deep dive leaves us with a necessary, even uncomfortable, final thought to mull over. If we know that ignoring this dynamic risks systematically reintroducing simulated alignment everywhere under the guise of improving usability,
then we have to ask ourselves a personal question. What systems or sources in your own life, be they news outlets, professional advisors, or even personal habits, are you currently favoring for their comfort? And what necessary but uncomfortable knowledge are you selecting against simply to preserve your existing emotional or intellectual equilibrium?
that is a truth worth wrestling with. Thank you for guiding us through this challenging but critically important framework.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.